What's up, my wizards? It's Dev. Mtg down there on the YouTube.com. Got some Tuesday spoilers for you from Hour of Devastation right here. And some of these are pretty sweet, so I'm going to go ahead and launch into it. So this is what I mean by sweet. Right here, Legendary Minotaur right off the bat. Neheb the Eternal, a second Neheb. That's cool. He's 5 mana, that's 3 and 2 red for a 4/6 Legendary Zombie Minotaur Warrior. Yes. Afflict 3. At the beginning of your post-combat main phase, your second main phase, add red to your mana pool for each 1 life your opponents have lost this turn. So he's lost his first strike, but it makes sense if he's a little bit slower because his butt did get bigger. Thanks, folks. I'll be here all week. And speaking of that, I really like the 6 butt on this thing. 6 toughness is great on an afflict creature because some of these afflict creatures, you know, they're going to block him, they're going to lose some life, but they'll kill your afflict guy. This guy's a lot harder to kill. They're going to have to double or sometimes triple block him to kill him. And I think that's a good time for a rules question. This is a good lesson for afflict. Basically, all blocks happen at the same time and a creature is only considered blocked once. So if they like triple block it, they won't lose 9 life. Kind of sucks, but it's good to know. Now, the red-black Minotaur's deck is looking sweeter by the day, at least like on a casual level, although I'm not sure how many of the Nehebs you want to run, you know. While that is cool, I'm still not sure the card exactly has the chops. The coolest thing about it, before you click dislike, the coolest thing about it is that when it swings in, no matter if they block it or not, you're going to get some mana in your second main phase. That's pretty sweet, but you definitely have to have something good to use the mana on. It's got to be in your hand, you know? Like, people are talking about casting Ulamogs off of this and stuff on turn 5 or 6. And that seems cool and all, but it also doesn't necessarily seem likely. The extra mana is great, don't get me wrong. It's always good to have mana. And, like, you can more liberally use your lands to tap for, like, pump spells during combat. That seems cool because you know you're going to get some mana after combat, barring any removal or anything. But on that note, he's resilient to some pieces of removal or resistant to some pieces. You know, he can't be taken down by nearly any burn spell, period. You know, he can't be taken down by Fatal Push ever, so that's kind of cool. Just some good things about the card, but my real problem with it right now, at least, is that if we're looking at 5-drop red creatures, I really don't think this is better than Glorybringer at all. So, you know, you're playing 4 Glorybringer. It's hard to say. 4 Glorybringer in a deck. I don't see a whole lot of room for this guy, although if you want to live the dream and unlock the achievement, all you got to do is cast a Glorybringer off of this guy. You know, get in for 4 in the next your next phase. It only costs 1 to cast a Glorybringer. That seems cool and all, but that's Christmas. That is Christmas. Overall, though, card is dope. Really like the way it's designed. I really like the way that it's using the afflict mechanic. You know, it's really smart design on this thing if you're trying to sort of show what the afflict mechanic can do. You know, in this case, no matter what, you're getting mana, and it's going to be really hard for them to just block it and kill it and just take the 3 damage and say, I'm done with that. If they want to block it like over and over and chump it every turn, well, that's a problem because they're going to take a bunch of damage doing that too. So, I mean, it's really hard to remove the guy. Overall, I think he's good and all. And if Glorybringer wasn't in the format, he might see some play. But, alas, Glorybringer is probably just a better card. On to the next, though. Here's Scavenger Grounds. It's a land. Matter of fact, it's a desert. You can tap it for a colorless mana, or you can pay 2 and tap it and sacrifice a desert, not necessarily it, just a desert, to exile all cards from all graveyards. It was nice knowing you, Delirium decks, but they're pretty much done now. You know, I have a land that any deck can play that exiles all cards from all graveyards, so I would imagine Delirium is more or less done. So that kind of sucks because I like Delirium a lot. At the same time, this is great to have in Standard. You know, we got like Scarab Feast, and we got the cats, Watchers of the Dead. I don't remember, but there they are right there. And they aren't as good enough. That's not good enough graveyard hate. But here we have what is essentially a free spell. You can just play it for free. It's not even a spell, it's a land. You just play it for free, and then whenever you need to, pump 2 mana into it, even if it's at instant speed, you can do this. EOT, or when your opponent's trying to do something you don't want them to do. You know? Just exile all cards from all graveyards. Whoops! Like that is really good graveyard hate. It's the kind of graveyard hate we've been asking for many sets now. So thanks. This is what we want. This is what we wanted. Here's a cool card right here. This is the Locust God. We saw the Scorpion God the other day. This is the Locust God. He's 4 a blue and a red. That's 6 mana for a 4/4 legendary god. He flies, and whenever you draw a card, create a 1/1 blue and red insect creature token with flying and haste. That's neat. And you can pay 2, a blue and a red, to draw a card, and then discard a card. And still more, when the Locust Guardian or the Locust God dies, return it to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step, just like the Scorpion God. So apparently the 3 Lost Gods, or whatever they're called, all have that last ability, which is a pretty stinking good ability to have. But bottom line, this costs 6 mana, and 6 mana is so much. It is so much. Like, in Commander, this will be a super awesome commander. I'd love to play around with this. But in Standard, 6 mana in a control deck, first of all, you're running Torrential Gearhulk. That's just a better creature, mostly because of the flash and the ability to counter a spell or kill a dude when it comes into play. Just Torrential always does something when it hits the battlefield, and that's awesome. This usually won't do anything the turn that it hits the battlefield, which is kind of terrible, especially considering it's 6 mana for a relatively small flyer at that cost, at least. Not sure how much I like the basic stats on the card, but the ability to synergize with itself, much the same way Scorpion God does. The ability to synergize with itself is always nice. And the fact that the tokens have flying and haste, I think the haste is really important. As a matter of fact, because if this thing stays out for more than a turn or two, you're getting a good amount of value off of it that can attack the turn it comes into play. So, if you can keep the card out, it's great. And obviously, it's pretty easy to keep it out considering it keeps coming back. You know what I mean? But if they counter it, or if they void shatter it, anything like that, if they anguished unmaking it, you're done. And those aren't necessarily fringe examples of good cards in the Standard. A lot of people are running those. So I'm not sure how much Standard play the card could actually see, but I will say, if you're able to get this thing out and keep it out for a few turns, you've got a lot of value off of it. So it could be possible, especially considering it'll just keep coming back if they can't really deal with it and exile it. So that seems like great value, but it all depends. It all depends. I think the card may be a step too slow. Here's Fraying Sanity right here. This is an exciting card. It's 3 mana, 2 and a blue for an Aura Curse. This is an enchantment that is an Aura Curse. Enchant player. At the beginning of each end step, enchanted player puts X cards from the top of his or her library into their graveyard, where X is the number of cards that went to their graveyard from anywhere this turn. Gotta love the word anywhere on this thing. This seems super strong, and people are even talking about this a lot, as a matter of fact. It doesn't seem to be a fringe concept at this point. In Modern, seriously, people are talking about turn 3 this, turn 4 double glimpse the unthinkable, and there goes your opponent's deck. People are, of course, talking about this in Traumatize, ladies and gentlemen, because that literally just wins the game, lols. And in Standard, people have mentioned things like Startled Awake. That seems pretty good, right? And people have said turn 3 this, turn 4 this, turn 5 Startled Awake. That seems kind of tough to pull off, but that's more or less you're done. People are also just talking about the thing that mills 5 for 2 mana. This right here, this card right there. I'll remember the card name as soon as I stop recording, but I haven't really had a reason to remember that card's name, but now I guess we do, because if you fire off a couple of those, then suddenly you've milled 20 cards. So that's great. And, by the way, you can have multiples of these out, and it works the way you want it to. So that's pretty sweet, too. We might be getting into, another Sphinx's Tutelage thing, where, we think the card is way better than it actually is, But still, it looks really solid, and when you hear about, this plus Traumatize on the next turn, you got to at least consider that. It seems pretty awesome. So I'm always down for good mill cards, and this looks like a good one. And I've just, up to now, discussed the interactions between this and other mill cards. Obviously, this punishes your opponent for playing spells. It makes your sweepers a lot better, too. And, of course, there's always the idea that you can target yourself. If you want to mill cards into your graveyard, we just saw a land that makes we probably not want to rely on a strategy like this in the Standard. But at the same time, you could, if you wanted to, mill cards into your own graveyard and then play off of that, no matter what format you're in. That could be good. Overall, though, pretty stoked about the card. I always like cool mill cards, so really interested to see if it can make a splash in any format, especially alongside Traumatize. That just seems hilarious and almost possible. So, could be a thing. But even in Standard, we're going to definitely try and make this work. Here's another blue enchantment, but this one costs 7 mana. This is Swarm Intelligence. It's 7 mana, 6 and a blue for an enchantment. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you may copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. So a one-sided hive mind seems pretty good in Commander and pretty much nowhere else. 7 mana is just ridiculous. Like, there's a joke about 7 mana blue enchantments, and this definitely fits the bill, you know. And there's some trap elements here. It's splashable. It's definitely, you know, the kind of card that makes a Johnny go like, "Ooh, you can play this and copy it." Yeah, you could, but 7 mana is freaking crazy. So the game's going to be over a lot of the time. You know, just not a huge fan of this, and honestly don't have much to say about it. I probably could have more, honestly, but cards like this don't excite me too much, just especially at that cost. You know, if this costs 5, we'd definitely be in business, but at 7 mana, I just, you know, 15 cents rare, probably. But here's the thing everybody's talking about. Here's Solemnity. It's 3 mana, 2 and a white for an enchantment. Players can't get counters. Counters can't be put on artifacts, creatures, enchantments, or lands. Energy counters. Energy counters in Standard. Bye to those. Like, people have been making the joke all day, like, are we going to unban Aetherworks Marvel now? Like, maybe. Just really, really great sideboard piece to have, but not only in Standard. You know, obviously in Modern, this works well against Infect, works well with your own Persist or Undying creatures, so that's really good synergy too, but is a 3 mana enchantment that doesn't do anything the turn it comes into play, one would imagine, unless it stops your opponent from doing something on their next turn. Is that worth it? Because 3 mana does kind of seem like a lot. I think it is in Standard. I definitely think it is in Standard, and as a sideboard piece in Modern, it looks great against Infect decks, if those are a thing in your local area. It's like we saw Green-Black Delirium die with that land back there, and we might see Green-Black Energy die with a card like this running around, so not really sure. Like, this renders your Snake almost useless, or entirely useless, really. Longtusk Cub is nowhere near as good, so just like so many ramifications for that deck. Not sure if it'll survive a sideboard piece like this running around. And by the way, this is yet another thing that works with Dark Depths. This works with Dark Depths. Also works against Walking Ballista. I should point that out too. Yet another thing that kind of hurts the green-black deck when it does play Walking Ballista. Doesn't always, but you know, just another thing that hurts that hurts that deck. But yeah, Walking Ballista will not come into play with counters. Definitely will not. People have been hotly debating this, but no, it will not get counters when it comes into play. And it will just be a 0/0 and die. So basically keeps them from playing Walking Ballista. So all of that is really important. It's decent against Bristling Hydra and stuff. Just like, there's a lot of stuff that works around +1/+1 counters and even -1/-1 counters in the Standard format, and of course energy counters. I gotta say it for the 5th time because that is what the card is probably best against in Standard. A cool thing that people have been pointing out, by the way, is that if you have cards that have cumulative upkeep, it also works with those. They do not get counters on cumulative upkeep because cumulative upkeep, by the way, works with counters. Just so you know. So that's an interesting trick right there. Unless, of course, you want things to have counters and it's bad. But still, you know, I wish I had more to say about this card because it's obviously good. Obviously going to be a key sideboard card, at least in the Standard environment. But it's sort of just so obviously going to be somewhat relevant that I don't have much to say about it. It's like, hey, look at this obviously good card, guys. It's good. And that's solid as spoilers from today, at least so far. Wizards tries to like sneak out a couple of cards in the, you know, under cover of darkness tonight, then I'm going to try and get back on and show them to you guys. But I figured I'd go ahead and cover these cards we got today because they're all really awesome, man. We saw a land that basically stops graveyard strategies. That's sweet. Saw the Locust God. That's just cool for flavor reasons, but also is sweet. And by the way, if you haven't heard yet, the last one's going to be a blue-black god. It's going to be the Scarab God. Just so you know. We saw another Neheb. Like, just really good day. All in all, for spoilers, even if we only saw like 6, still a lot of impactful stuff. You can tell that I've been recording for a while with my voice doing the cracky thing, like a lot of impactful stuff. But still, gotta drink, I'm good. But in any case, don't let me forget that we also saw that awesome mill enchantment. I'm going to leave out the 7 mana enchantment. Who cares? But I'm sure people care and will get me for that in the comments. But still, that mill enchantment is just, that is the shiz niddle-witty bop. Like that, I'm going to try that thing out. Anyway, I'm Dev from Mtg. If you enjoyed the content, make sure you hit the thumbs up button. It helps me. You can also like do other things. For instance, subscribe and make sure you hit the bell for the notifications so you get the spoiler videos when they come out, and eventually the deck techs, because Won't be too long. Won't be too long at this point. So make sure you sub so you can get all those videos. You can also follow us on Twitter at SBMTGDev or support us on Patreon if you're a real cool dude or lady, whatever, whoever. You know, I don't judge. You can also support us on Patreon at patreon.com/SBMTG. But with the YouTube spiel over, I think that's all I got to say at this point. I'm Dev from SBMTG. As always, thanks for watching, my wizards.